This is ASRock's Z690 Aqua motherboard, and I've been dutifully informed that if you fancy picking one of these up, you'll have to part ways with $1,300. Quite probably the same in Great British pounds too, or more money than most people's first car costs. Like, what? For that absolute insanity of a price tag, I've heard they give you a rather special experience. So first I want to take a look at what you get for, well, all of your money. Then, since this is a custom water-cooled board, I thought it would make sense to build a rather nice little system with the help of this video sponsor, Phanteks and OverclockersUK, complete with a custom water cooling loop, of course. Then test it along with some high-speed DDR5 5600 RAM to see if all of this fanciness and madness makes literally any difference. Okay, first let's take a look at this board. You can tell just by how, really heavy, but also how kind of premium the box feels, that this is clearly meant to be a premium experience. Everything from the fact that when you fold it open, the front cover has a cutout for the Aqua logo, and there is a second pull tab to open it up fully, where you find a little envelope with, in my case, TechteamGB written on it. It's rather nice, rather fancy. It's also in the little sort of hidey hole. If I open this up, you can see what's inside, which is a letter from ASRock's president, with, in my case, a little almost credit card thing. I'll show it to the above camera with TechteamGB embossed on it, which is very fancy. What this is meant to be is your sort of certificate of authenticity type thing, in obviously the thank you for buying this very fancy motherboard. Here is your sort of proof that you own this specific one, because these are a limited edition. There's apparently 500 total, and so I would assume this card will say that it's whatever number of 500 you have. And if I take this off, well, then you'll notice, well, actually you might not, but I'll show you later, it's actually embossed TechteamGB on the board as well. But like I said, that will normally say, 1 of 500, 10 of 500, whatever, and that will correlate to the cards you have. But yeah, here is the insane motherboard. It is ridiculously heavy, mostly because of the water block, but also, I don't know if I mentioned already, don't think I did, all of these sort of shiny metal pieces, they're all stainless steel. Like, seriously, this is overkill to the max, and when I cover the specs in a second, you'll also understand why. Let me just gently put this down here, it's quite heavy, and move this other cover, and you will find all of the accessories, all in nice, neat little boxes. Of course, you have a manual and driver CD if you really want. This one's quite fun. So you have a couple of SATA cables because, sure, but then this other bag that's in here has your thermal pads, specifically extra thermal pads for the heatsink and for the M.2 SSDs. They come on these really nice cards with sort of silkscreen printing on them. I'll try and show the camera up top. That not only detail which one is which, but even where they go on the respective parts. So for this one, it's the VRMs, or the CPU water block. So these are some extra thermal pads so that if you want to keep using the board even when the existing pads are dried out, you can just keep these in a nice sealed bag away from, getting, well, deteriorating over time, and replace them when you fancy. But the really funny thing about this is that they do also include some thermal paste. I'll show that to the top camera as well. This is comically small. It's comically both small, unbranded, looks like some real cheap stuff. And while I'm sure that it's probably not, it's also worth noting that they're not expecting you to use this. They're including this because they're including a CPU cooler block, and you probably shouldn't sell a CPU cooler block without some thermal paste, just in case someone will complain. But they're not intending you to use this, they're intending you to go and buy whatever the fanciest stuff you want is, and use that instead. Of course, you also get your Wi-Fi antennas and the screws for your M.2 SSDs, but that's not the cubby that interests me the most here. The one that interests me the most is this big one, which is this. It is a water cooling loop, leak tester. It's a little, basically just hand pump with a pressure gauge and an adapter for, kind of looks like a Schrader valve, but probably. Anyway, an adapter for an air valve to a G1/4 fitting with a hole in it. And so what you do, and I'll show you this later, is you use this to pressurize your loop before putting any fluid in it to check for leaks, so that you can basically pre-leak test your system without ever having to put your water, your fluid in. You don't ever have to, put all the paper towels under every single fitting and then just hope that it doesn't leak. You can actively pressurize it, and then if it doesn't drop any pressure, it means that all of your fittings are all good, there's no leaks anywhere, and you can just fill your loop with confidence instead. So I'm looking forward to trying this. The board itself is pretty crazy. Under this massive water block is a 20-phase, 105 amp smart power stage VRM solution that should just about be able to handle the thermonuclear reactor that is the i9-12900K that we'll be using here. Also, it has a little OLED display to show your status messages, triple M.2 slots, PCI Gen 5 to not only the top X16 slot, which is fairly common, but also can be split or bifurcated down to the second X16 slot, which is generally more rare. You even get both 10 gig and 2.5 gig LAN on the back on top of the Wi-Fi 6E, and that is the 10 gig LAN is the Aquantia AQC1113CS chip, not the now aging but quite common AQC107. There's also dual Thunderbolt 4 ports with 2 DisplayPort inputs to feed display signals through those Thunderbolt ports. That's pretty crazy to see, especially having 2 of them. And like I said, you also get the old TechteamGB name on the chipset, which if you were to pick one of these up would be one of 500 or whatever, and your little card that you get in the box is, like I said, kind of like your certificate of authenticity. Anyway, enough fawning over this. Let's actually take a look at the case and then build it into a system. The main attraction for this build, beyond the insane motherboard anyway, is this, the Phanteks Enthoo Evolve X, now in a rather stunning white. While they are quite literally paying me to say this, I genuinely love Phanteks cases. The reason that I most of the build guides I do are in them, and the Evolve X in particular is still hands down my favorite PC case on the market right now. Everything about it has been actually thought through, thought out, and tailored to both look great, I mean, just look at the thing, and make it functional and easy to actually build in. All of the screws come in this nice hard plastic carrying case with nice dividers, so you can just store them easily. You can store this whole thing easily in a drawer without getting a random bag of screws lost, and they're all separated, so whenever you need to add another thumb screw in, they're just there and easy to get. This is a really nice additional touch, but the case itself has them too. You can obviously open the doors, which aren't just screwed in. The tempered glass isn't just screwed on in 4 places. No, these are on a rather nice hinge, and you can just swing them out to then easily work on something, or lift them up and off to be able to get them out. They even have nice weather stripping type stuff on the inside for sound isolation, so that when you shut the door, there's a nice reasonable air seal around them. There's also little things like the central standoffs that come pre-installed have a small lip so that you can hang the motherboard on them rather than trying to fish it around in place. You have loads of covers that are in reasonable places, a very nice power supply basement with lots of customizability for things like water cooling, blanking plates to cover off any open sort of vents, especially up top, And hell, if you buy the extra bracket, you can even install an ITX motherboard up at the top as a second system for a NAS, for a streaming PC, a file server, a media server, all within the same case. And if you use their Revolt X power supply, you can power both of those systems from one power supply from the bottom, which is a really cool feature to have. For this build though, I'm going to be using their Revolt Pro, which is actually really impressive, comes with a 12-year warranty, but also has the added feature of being able to daisy chain the power supplies together, like multiple. Now, obviously I can't use it in the Evolve X, but it's a pretty cool feature to have if you're building in, say, some of Phanteks' larger cases that do have 2 power supply mounting locations, and or you're building some crazy power-hungry, system that could do with a bit of extra power. And also, hypothetically, it could be, say, a slightly bit more efficient. Obviously, you don't need one massive one, you can have 2 smaller ones. It's all pretty sweet. And of course, all of this stuff will be, I'll leave Overclockers UK affiliate links in the description if you do want to check them out or pick them up yourself. I'll leave links to everything that I physically can. Things like the RAM might not be available right now, and the motherboard just doesn't seem to be something that you can purchase full stop right now, so that probably won't be linked to the description just yet, but hey, if it becomes available, I'll leave it there. Otherwise, we've talked a lot about the components and the build, so let's actually build it. Okay, let me walk you through the full setup. Of course, we have our beautiful Phanteks Evolve X case, which is housing our insane £1.5 motherboard, which itself is housing an Intel i9 12900K, 32GB of DDR5 5600 CL40 Kingston RAM, a 2TB Sabrent Rocket 4 Plus SSD, an Asus Strix OC RTX 3070 Ti, our 850W Revolt Pro power supply, and naturally a completely overkill water cooling setup with a D5 pump, res, 240 and 360mm radiators, and hardline tubing across it all, because why not? Not bad, eh? Before I filled the loop, I attached the little, well, leak detector pump that came included with the motherboard and pressurized the whole system to around 7 psi as indicated on the gauge. I shut off the drain valve I have on the back on one of the extra pump slots and left the system pressurized for around half an hour. And when I came back, it was still at the same pressure, meaning I should have no leaks. Filling the loop was a big pain, partly thanks to I would call poor planning on my part, and partly because that water block does not like to release its air bubbles. But luckily, I do have this EK sort of fill bottle, which made filling the reservoir easier, with, of course, our EK cryo fuel, the solid cloud white variety, which is actually rather nice. After shaking this thing like an absolute madman to get all of those air bubbles out, I also went ahead and overclocked the chip to a pretty, well, I think at least for these early samples, decent 5.2 GHz on all, at least all the P cores, and 3.8 GHz on all of the E cores. And of course our RAM is running at its full 5600 megatransfers per second, and all in, this chip chokes back an absolutely astonishing 310 watts, and it smashes its way up to 101 degrees Celsius nearly instantly, even with this full cover block and a massive lump of metal on top. The central E-cores hit 102, again, almost instantly, and generally stay there kind of the whole time that it's rendering. The fans actually ramp up pretty hard too. That is something I could tweak in the BIOS, but it also feels somewhat needed considering how insane this chip is, so I might just leave it as is. But does all this fancy stuff, the water cooling, the first year of car insurance priced motherboard, and the high-speed RAM actually make any difference? Well, yes, but also no. Cinebench sees a decent 5% rise compared to both running at Intel spec of 4800 megatransfers per second and this kit's rated 5600, but without a CPU overclock, and more like a 6 or 7% lead in the two Blender render tests. Hell, it can even offer between 3 and 8% more performance in the Adobe CC suite, as shown by the Puget Bench, well, suite as well, which is a great test by the way. But like I said, your power bill will be suffering some consequences. But also, let's face it, if you're dropping $1.5 grand on a motherboard and probably ends up being close to $4 grand for this entire system, then I don't think that you're gonna care that much about your power bill. What you'll care about is gaming. And especially compared to the sort of base spec 4800 RAM in a CPU heavy game like CSGO, even at 1440p on those settings, you can expect something like 10% more performance, which is pretty sweet. Never mind it's a difference between 550 and 600 FPS, that's not important, right? Anyway, Microsoft Flight at 1440p medium settings can give almost 10 FPS more on average and over 20% better 1% low performance. And Shadow of the Tomb Raider CPU render results are insane. Almost 15% more CPU render performance compared to the stock RAM setting, and 13% better 95% times 2. The in-game average FPS is pretty much within margin of error though. And that's the case with both Cyberpunk 2077, where our mad OC build is within 1 FPS average of the other runs, and also in FORTNITE, where it's an almost exact tie, like down to the second decimal place with the higher frequency memory run, albeit with slightly improved 1% low figures, actually across both of those games. So does all of this madness really improve your performance, gaming or not? Well, in short, no. If you're planning a new build, especially in whites, I can't recommend the new White Evolve X enough. It is a genuinely well thought out case, it's stylish as hell, especially in this rather stunning white, and feels like it was designed by people who've actually built a PC before, and they know the pains that you go through when building them, and they've generally solved them in, when building in this, which makes it nice and easy and simple to build in, and just a nice experience. Check it out at the OverclockersUK link in the description, along with some of the other parts from here, like the Revolt Pro power supply. And of course, thank you to both Phanteks and OverclockersUK for sponsoring this video, and thank you to you guys for watching. Hope it's been enjoyable, even somewhat informative, hopefully somewhat entertaining as well. If you want to see more videos like this one, first of all, let me know in the comments, because this is a slightly different style to what I'm used to doing. Or if you want to check out more of my standard, more sort of genuine comparisons and test videos, then feel free to check those out on the end cards as well. And of course, hit the subscribe button if you want to see more like this, or maybe stuff like my smart home series that I've been doing recently, the DIY smart home. Feel free to check it out. Like I said, check out the links to this in the description if you want to support me and the channel, and of course you can keep watching these sponsored videos and all of the other ones, but there's also a load of other links in the description you can check out. And yeah, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed it, we'll see you on the next video.